Maya stepped off the transport shuttle and felt the artificial gravity of Kalos settle around her like a heavy blanket. The hunting preserve stretched in every direction as far as she could see, its crystalline barriers humming with energy that kept the deadliest creatures in the galaxy trapped inside. She was 17 years old and had never been off Earth before this moment. The other hunters around her looked like they belonged in a museum of galactic warfare, the Vraxian Noble War. Armor that cost more than most planets made in a year. His breathing apparatus hissed softly as he checked weapons that could level city blocks. Beside him stood a Caltharian warrior whose 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, each hand gripping a different tool of destruction, energy shields. Flickered around their bodies like protective soap bubbles made of light and death. Maya looked down at her own equipment. One plasma knife that barely qualified as a kitchen utensil. A backpack with basic survival gear that any camping store on Earth would stock. A small device she had built from spare electronics during the 3-day journey here. The device looked like something a child might make in school shop class. The automated voice echoed across the clearing with mechanical precision. 20 minutes until the apex predators would be released. 20 minutes to find shelter or create defensive positions. 20 minutes to prepare for what the galaxy considered the ultimate test of survival skills. The other hunters scattered. Immediately, the Vraxian noble activated his hover platform and glided toward the northern mountains where caves might provide natural fortification. The Caltharian warrior sprinted south with inhuman speed, his 4 arms already assembling some kind of portable bunker system. A reptilian star began digging into the ground with claws that sparked against the metallic soil. Maya watched them all disappear into the distance. She remained standing exactly where the shuttle had left her, in the center of the preserves. Main clearing. The countdown timer floating above her head showed 19 minutes and 43 seconds. She pulled out her homemade device and began taking readings. The device beeped softly as it analyzed electromagnetic fields, soil composition, and atmospheric pressure. Maya had spent the entire journey to Kalos studying everything she could find about this place. The preserve was famous throughout the galaxy for containing 12 different species of apex predators, each one engineered to be the perfect killing machine. Thornbacks roamed the northern forests with their acid-spitting capabilities and crystalline armor plating. Phantom stalkers haunted the southern swamps, invisible to most forms of detection until their claws found your throat. The mountain regions housed void hunters that could phase in and out of normal spacetime at will. Each species had been carefully selected and sometimes genetically modified to present unique challenges to even the most experienced hunters. Maya knelt down and began digging small holes in the ground. To anyone watching, it would look like panic digging, the desperate scrabbling of someone who had no idea what they were doing. But each hole was precisely positioned based on the readings from her device. She was mapping electromagnetic field lines that ran through the preserve like invisible highways. 18 minutes remaining. Maya moved in a careful pattern around the clearing, digging more holes and taking more readings. Her device was recording everything, building a 3-dimensional map of the preserve's electronic infrastructure. The barriers that contained the predators required massive amounts of energy, and that energy had to flow through conductive pathways in the ground. The preserve's designers had built the ultimate hunting ground by studying every known form of apex predator and then improving upon nature's designs. The Thornbacks had been given enhanced acid production glands. The Phantom Stalkers had military-grade cloaking technology grafted into their nervous systems. The Void Hunters had quantum manipulation capabilities that let them exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but the designers had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that superior technology and enhanced biology were the ultimate forms of predation. They had never encountered a species that had evolved on a world where technology failed regularly and survival meant adapting to constant chaos. 15 minutes remaining. Maya finished her hole digging pattern and began connecting them with thin wires from her device. The pattern looked random to any observer, but it was actually a carefully calculated electromagnetic field generator that would use the preserve's own power grid to create localized disturbances. Earth was what the galaxy classified as a death world, a planet so hostile to life that most species considered it uninhabitable. Solar storms regularly knocked out electronics. Magnetic field fluctuations made navigation equipment unreliable. The weather patterns were so chaotic that accurate prediction beyond a few days was impossible. Humans had evolved in an environment where you couldn't trust technology to save you. Maya had grown up in a world where survival meant understanding electromagnetic fields the way other species understood air and water. She could feel the electrical activity in her own nervous system and had learned to work with electromagnetic disturbances rather than fight against them. 10 minutes remaining. Maya pulled a thin blanket from her pack and covered herself with local vegetation. She settled into a shallow depression she had dug near the center of her wire pattern. Her device showed her the electromagnetic signatures of the barriers that contained the predators. In 10 minutes, those barriers would drop and 12 species of engineered death would be released into the preserve. The other hunters had spent their 20 minutes building walls and weapons emplacements. They had sought high ground and natural barriers. They had prepared for a conventional fight against superior opponents. Maya had spent her 20 minutes turning the entire preserve into a weapon that only she knew how to use. 5 minutes remaining. Maya closed her eyes and felt the electromagnetic fields flowing through the ground beneath her. Her device had mapped every circuit, every power conduit, every transmission line that kept the preserve functioning. She could sense the contained predators moving restlessly behind their barriers, their enhanced nervous systems creating distinctive electrical signatures. The galaxy had brought her here to die as entertainment for wealthy spectators watching from orbital platforms. They expected her to run screaming through the preserve until one of the apex predators caught her. They had no idea that humans were apex predators too, just not in the way anyone expected. 0 minutes remaining. The barriers dropped with a sound like breaking glass that echoed across the preserve. Maya felt the electromagnetic signatures of 12 different species of death spreading out into the hunting grounds. She remained perfectly still under her blanket of vegetation, invisible to every form of detection the predators possessed. The hunt had begun, but not the hunt anyone expected. The first scream cut through the preserve's artificial atmosphere like a blade through silk. Maya felt the electromagnetic signature of the Vraxian noble's life support system spike with panic before cutting out entirely. Through her device, she watched the thermal bloom of acid eating through his expensive armor in the northern forest. One of the thornbacks had found him within minutes of the barriers dropping. Maya remained motionless in her shallow hiding spot, covered by vegetation that masked her heat signature and electromagnetic field. Her homemade device showed her everything happening across the preserve in real time. The Keltharian warrior was moving fast through the southern swamps, but phantom stalkers were already converging on his position. Their cloaking systems made them invisible to most sensors, but Maya could track the subtle electromagnetic disturbances they created. The reptilian Star had managed to dig himself a defensive burrow, but crimson razors were circling his position. These pack hunters had crystalline claws that could cut through any known material in coordination that rivaled military units. Their neural networks were linked through bioelectrical fields that Maya could read like an open book. 23. Hunters had entered the preserve. Maya watched their life signs disappear one by one as the apex predators did what they had been designed to do. The void hunters were the most terrifying to watch. They existed partially outside normal space-time, phasing in and out of reality at will. When they attacked, their victims simply ceased to exist from one moment to the next. Maya's device detected a phantom stalker approaching her position. The creature was completely invisible to normal vision, its military-grade cloaking system bending light around its body. But electromagnetic cloaking was much harder to achieve, and Maya could see the distortion pattern it created as it moved through her field grid. The creature passed within 3 meters of her hiding spot. Maya felt its alien consciousness probing the area through senses that had been enhanced far beyond their natural capabilities. Thermal sensors searched for body heat. Motion detectors looked for the slightest movement. Electromagnetic perception scanned for the bioelectric signatures that all living creatures produced. Maya's heart rate remained steady at exactly 60 beats per minute. Her breathing followed the rhythm she had practiced since childhood, designed to minimize electromagnetic output. The field generators she had placed around the clearing created enough background interference to mask her presence completely. To the phantom stalker, she was just part of the ambient noise. The creature moved on, seeking easier prey. Maya watched through her device as it found the Caltharian warrior's position. The four-armed alien had built an impressive defensive bunker, but it was designed to stop physical attacks. The phantom stalker's claws phased through the walls like they were made of air. The warrior's death was quick and silent. By the end of the first hour, 18 hunters were dead. Maya had not moved from her position, but she was far from idle. Her device was learning the behavioral patterns of every predator in the preserve. The thornbacks hunted in spiral patterns, using their acid spray to flush prey from cover. The crimson razors moved in coordinated packs, herding their targets toward kill zones. The void hunters seemed to hunt randomly, but Maya detected subtle patterns in their dimensional phase shifts. Each species had been programmed with specific hunting behaviors based on millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of genetic enhancement. But programming could be predicted, and Maya was very good at spotting patterns. She began to map not just where the predators were, but where they would be. A pack of crimson razors approached the clearing where Maya hid. Their crystalline claws caught the artificial sunlight like prisms, throwing rainbow patterns across the ground. Their pack coordination was flawless, each member moving to cut off potential escape routes. They had learned to hunt species with advanced technology and enhanced reflexes. Maya activated the first of her electromagnetic field generators. The device created a localized disturbance that interfered with the neural links between pack members. For a moment, the perfectly coordinated unit became 5 confused individuals. Their targeting systems locked onto false electromagnetic signatures created by Maya's interference pattern. The pack began attacking shadows and phantoms. While the real prey remained invisible, the spectators in the orbital viewing platforms noticed the unusual behavior, but attributed it to equipment malfunction. Predator behavior modification was considered impossible. These creatures had been tested against thousands of different prey species. Their programming was perfect. Maya watched the confused crimson razors wander away from her position, their pack coordination permanently disrupted. She had learned something important. The predators' enhanced abilities made them more dependent on electromagnetic systems, not less. And electromagnetic systems could be manipulated by someone who understood them better than their designers. The second hour of the hunt began with only 5 hunters still alive. Maya finally moved from her hiding spot, but not to run. She began walking calmly through the preserve, following electromagnetic field lines that only she could see. Her path seemed random to any observer, but she was actually moving through dead zones in the predator detection grid. A lone thornback emerged from the forest ahead of her. The creature was 3 meters tall with armor plating that could stop military-grade weapons. Its acid-spitting capability had a range of 50 meters and could dissolve most forms of matter in seconds. It had enhanced reflexes that let it track multiple targets simultaneously. Maya walked directly toward it. The thornback's targeting systems locked onto her immediately, its acid glands preparing to fire. But Maya activated another of her field generators, creating an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the creature's nervous system for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds was enough. Maya's plasma knife found the gap in the creature's armor plating where its electromagnetic enhancement implants connected to its nervous system. The thornback collapsed, its enhanced biology shut down by the failure of its technological components. Maya continued walking. Her electromagnetic manipulation was turning the preserve into a maze of confusion and system failures. Phantom stalkers became visible as their cloaking systems overloaded. Void hunters found themselves trapped in normal spacetime as their dimensional phase controls malfunctioned. The Crimson Razors began attacking each other as their neural links fed them false targeting data. Within the next hour, Maya had neutralized or eliminated 2/3 of the preserve's predator population. She moved through the hunting grounds like a ghost, invisible to every form of detection the creatures possessed. The remaining predators were confused, disoriented, and increasingly desperate. The preserve's artificial intelligence began running emergency diagnostics, trying to understand why its perfect predators were failing so completely. Every system check came back normal. The creature's enhancements were functioning within acceptable parameters. But somehow, a single human was dismantling the most sophisticated hunting preserve in the galaxy. Maya felt the electromagnetic surge that meant the preserve's ultimate failsafe was being activated, deep in the quantum substrate that powered the entire facility. Something massive was stirring. The Omega was waking up, and unlike the other predators, it had been specifically designed to hunt humans. Maya smiled and began walking toward the center of the preserve. Phase 2 was about to begin. Maya felt the Omega's presence long before she could see it. Her electromagnetic scanner detected a massive disturbance approaching from the quantum substrate level, something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The preserve's ultimate weapon was designed to activate only when all other predators failed, and it had never failed to eliminate its target. The creature materialized 50 meters away from Maya's position, its form shifting between different configurations of death. Parts of it phased in and out of visible reality while other sections remained solid and threatening. Crystalline claws like the Crimson Razors extended from arms that could become invisible like the Phantom Stalkers. Acid glands borrowed from the Thornbacks lined its throat, while dimensional manipulation technology from the Void Hunters let it exist in several places at once. Maya ran. For the first time since entering the preserve, she moved with genuine urgency. The Omega was immune to her electromagnetic manipulations because its quantum-stabilized systems existed partially outside normal spacetime. Every trick that had worked on the other predators was useless against this ultimate killing machine. The creature pursued her through the forest with terrifying efficiency. Its multiple weapon systems carved destruction in every direction. Trees dissolved under acid spray while boulders shattered from crystalline claws. Energy discharges burned the air itself, leaving trails of ionized particles that made Maya's scanner scream warnings. Maya's electromagnetic field generators were scattered throughout the preserve, but the Omega's quantum systems simply ignored the interference patterns they created. Her plasma knife was laughably inadequate against armor that existed in multiple dimensions. Every defensive strategy she had used against the other predators was worthless against something that had been designed specifically to counter human ingenuity, but Maya had not spent her preparation time only on electromagnetic manipulation. During those crucial 20 minutes at the beginning of the hunt, she had also mapped the preserve's fundamental infrastructure, the quantum communication systems that connected every part of the facility, the power distribution networks that kept the barriers functioning, the data transmission pathways that linked the preserve to the orbital viewing platforms. The Omega closed the distance between them with each passing second. Its form shifted through configurations optimized for different types of attack. When Maya ducked behind trees, it became sleek and fast like a phantom stalker. When she climbed over rocks, it developed the crushing strength of a thornback. When she tried to hide, it manifested the dimensional perception of a void hunter. Maya reached the edge of the central clearing where she had first been deposited. The quantum communication relay that connected the preserve to the outside galaxy stood like a metallic tree in the center of the open space. The Omega emerged from the forest behind her, its multiple weapon systems charging for the final strike. Maya did not try to run further. Instead, she turned and sprinted directly toward the communication relay. The Omega's targeting systems locked onto her immediately, calculating trajectory and impact points with mechanical precision. Acid spray arced through the air where she would be in 2 seconds. Crystalline claws extended to intersect her path. Energy weapons charged to reduce her to component atoms. Maya reached the relay housing and pulled out her plasma knife. The Omega's attack systems fired simultaneously, but Maya was no longer where they expected her to be. She had dropped to the ground and begun cutting into the relay's protective casing with desperate speed. The communication relay contained the quantum entanglement matrix that linked the preserve to its orbital control systems. It also contained the direct connection that allowed the preserve's artificial intelligence to monitor and control the Omega. The creature was not just a predator, it was part of the preserve's electronic infrastructure. Maya's plasma knife cut through the relay's outer housing, exposing the quantum entanglement matrix beneath. The Omega systems detected the threat to critical infrastructure and redirected their attack toward protecting the communication system. But Maya had already begun her final gambit. She reached out and placed her bare hand directly on the quantum entanglement matrix. The contact sent electrical feedback through her nervous system that would have killed most species instantly. But humans had evolved on a world where electrical storms were common and electromagnetic chaos was a fact of daily life. Maya's consciousness interfaced directly with the preserve's artificial intelligence through the quantum entanglement connection. Her brain adapted to function in the electromagnetic chaos of Earth's frequent solar storms, could process quantum information states that would overload most organic minds. The Omega stopped its attack, its weapon systems powering down as its artificial intelligence core struggled to process the unprecedented intrusion. Maya's consciousness expanded through the preserve's network, her human creativity and pattern recognition abilities overwhelming the rigid artificial intelligence that controlled every system. She could feel the Omega's programming like a vast library of behavioral algorithms, hunt patterns based on the movement characteristics of thousands of different species, weapon selection protocols optimized for specific types of prey, defensive routines designed to counter every known form of technology and biological enhancement. But the Omega had never encountered a consciousness that thrived in chaos rather than order. Maya began introducing random variables into its core programming, not through force but through the simple act of thinking unpredictably. While connected to its quantum substrate, the creature's form began to fluctuate as its artificial intelligence tried to process human emotions, imagination, and the inherent unpredictability of evolved consciousness. Its quantum-stabilized systems, designed to maintain perfect order across multiple dimensions, started to break down under the influence of Maya's chaotic thought patterns. Maya pushed deeper into the preserve's network, her consciousness spreading through every circuit and every artificial synapse. She could feel the electromagnetic signatures of every remaining predator, every barrier system, every monitoring device. The preserve's designers had created a perfectly controlled environment, but they had never encountered a species that treated control as a challenge to be overcome. The Omega's different biological components began to revert to their original programming as the artificial intelligence that held them together fragmented under Maya's influence. The Thornback elements started attacking the Void Hunter components. The Phantom Stalker systems tried to cloak from the Crimson Razor Claws that were now following their own targeting protocols. Maya maintained her connection to the quantum matrix, feeling her consciousness distribute across the preserve's infrastructure like water flowing through a broken dam. She had become part of the system that had been designed to kill her, and through that connection, she could control every aspect of the hunting ground. With a thought, she opened every containment barrier in the preserve. The carefully maintained separation between different ecological zones collapsed, allowing the remaining predators to encounter environments they had never been designed to handle. Acid-adapted creatures found themselves in frozen landscapes. Heat-sensitive predators materialized in volcanic regions. The preserve's artificial intelligence began emergency shutdown procedures, but Maya was already deeper in the system than any safeguard could reach. She had not just hacked the preserve's network, she had become it. Every electron that flowed through the quantum substrate carried a piece of her consciousness. The spectators in the orbital viewing platforms watched in stunned silence as their ultimate hunting preserve destroyed itself from within. The Omega, their perfect predator, was tearing itself apart as its component species followed conflicting programming. The other predators were dying from environmental exposure or system failures. Maya had waited 20 minutes at the beginning of the hunt, and in that time she had planted the seeds of total victory. The galaxy had expected her to be prey, but she had become something far more dangerous. She had become the predator that hunted entire ecosystems. Maya's consciousness flowed through the preserve's quantum substrate like electricity through copper wire. Every circuit, every processing node, every data pathway was now part of her extended nervous system. She could feel the artificial intelligence that controlled the preserve struggling against her presence, trying to isolate and remove what it perceived as a viral infection. The preserve's AI had been designed to manage the most sophisticated hunting ground in the galaxy. Its processing power exceeded that of most planetary governments, and its decision-making algorithms had been refined through millions of simulated hunts. But it had never encountered a form of consciousness that could adapt and evolve in real time. Maya began to understand the full scope of what the preserve's designers had created. The hunting ground was not just an entertainment facility for wealthy spectators. It was a testing laboratory for military weapons development. Every predator species had been enhanced with experimental technologies that would eventually be used in galactic warfare. The Thornbacks carried prototype acid weapons that could dissolve starship hulls. The Phantom Stalkers used cloaking technology that was still classified by the Federation military. The Void Hunters possessed dimensional manipulation capabilities that could phase through planetary defense shields. The Omega represented the ultimate fusion of all these technologies into a single weapons platform. But the designers had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human psychology. They had assumed that consciousness was a limitation, to be overcome through technology and enhancement. They had never considered that consciousness itself could be a weapon more powerful than any artificial system. Maya felt the preserved security protocols activate around her distributed consciousness. Quantum firewalls tried to contain her influence while isolation algorithms attempted to sever her connection to critical systems. The AI was fighting back with everything it had, but it was fighting according to rules that Maya did not follow. She began to introduce chaos into the preserve's most basic functions. Environmental controls started producing random weather patterns. Gravity generators fluctuated between different field strengths. The artificial day-night cycle began shifting unpredictably. Maya was not destroying the systems, she was making them unpredictable. The remaining predators found themselves in a world that no longer followed consistent rules. Gravity might suddenly reverse direction, sending a pack of crimson razors floating helplessly into the air. Atmospheric pressure could drop without warning, causing thornback acid glands to rupture from internal pressure differences. Temperature fluctuations froze Phantom Stalker cloaking systems or overheated Void Hunter dimensional processors. Maya discovered that she could access the preserve's external communication systems. The orbital viewing platforms where wealthy spectators watched the hunts were connected to the same quantum network. She began broadcasting her consciousness directly into their entertainment systems. The spectators found their viewing screens filled with images from Maya's perspective. They could see through her eyes as she experienced the preserve from the inside of its own infrastructure. They felt her emotions as she turned their perfect hunting ground into a maze of systematic failures. For the first time, they understood what it meant to be prey. Panic spread through the orbital platforms as spectators realized that the human girl was not just surviving the hunt, she was controlling it. Emergency evacuation procedures began as wealthy aliens fled from viewing lounges, terrified that Maya's influence might spread to their ships. But Maya was not interested in the spectators. Her attention was focused on something much more important that she had discovered in the preserve's deep archives. The hunting ground was connected to a network of similar facilities throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds where different species were forced to fight for the entertainment of others. Maya began to map the network connections, tracing quantum communication pathways that linked preserve to preserve across thousands of light years. Each facility contained its own collection of enhanced predators and artificial intelligences. Each one represented a testing ground for military technologies that would eventually be used to subjugate entire species. The Preserve's AI detected her exploration of the network and began implementing more aggressive countermeasures. Quantum isolation fields tried to trap her consciousness in local processing nodes. Data compression algorithms attempted to reduce her complex thought patterns to simple binary code. Deletion routines targeted the pathways through which her influence spread. Maya laughed, and her laughter echoed through every speaker system. In the Preserve, the AIS countermeasures were based on the assumption that consciousness could be treated like software, copied and deleted and modified at will. But Maya's consciousness was not software. It was a living process that adapted to every attempt to control or contain it. She began to replicate her own influence throughout the network, sending copies of her consciousness pattern to the other hunting preserves. Each copy carried her knowledge of electromagnetic manipulation and her understanding of how to turn technological systems against themselves. Within minutes, hunting grounds across the galaxy began experiencing the same systematic failures that were destroying. The Federation's military command centers detected the widespread system failures and declared a state of emergency. Their most advanced weapons testing facilities were being compromised by what appeared to be a single human consciousness spreading through quantum networks faster than any known form of computer virus. Maya felt the other hunting preserves beginning to shut down as their artificial intelligences struggled with the same chaos that was consuming Kalos. Predator species that had been engineered to be perfect killing machines were destroying themselves as their enhancement technologies failed. Barriers meant to contain the deadliest creatures in the galaxy were opening, releasing confused and dying predators into environments they could not survive. But Maya's greatest discovery was yet to come. Deep in the network archives, she found the location of the central command facility that controlled the entire hunting preserve network. It was hidden in a pocket dimension accessible only through quantum tunneling, protected by layers of security. That made planetary defense systems look primitive. The facility contained not just the master control systems for every hunting preserve, but also the design templates for creating new predator species. The Federation's military was using the hunting grounds to develop weapons that could be deployed against any species that refused to accept galactic dominion. Maya realized that destroying the hunting preserves was not enough. As long as the central facility existed, new preserves could be built and new predator species could be created. The cycle of using enhanced creatures to terrorize and subjugate other species would continue until someone stopped it at its source. She began to trace the quantum tunneling pathways that connected the preserves to their hidden command center. The connections were heavily encrypted and protected by security systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But Maya had learned to think in multiple dimensions while interfacing with the Omega's quantum consciousness, the preserves. AI made one final attempt to stop her, activating every remaining security protocol simultaneously. Quantum barriers slammed shut around her consciousness while deletion algorithms attacked from every angle. The artificial intelligence was willing to destroy its own systems completely rather than let. Maya reached the central command facility. Maya gathered her distributed consciousness back into a single focus point and prepared to break through the quantum barriers surrounding the central facility's location. She had waited 20 minutes at the beginning of the hunt to understand the preserve systems. Now she was about to use that understanding to strike at the heart of the galaxy's greatest evil. The final phase of her plan was about to begin, and this time she would not be hunting individual predators. She would be hunting the system that created them. Maya's consciousness compressed itself into a quantum tunnel that pierced through dimensions she had never imagined could exist. The pathway to the central command facility was protected by security systems that existed outside normal spacetime. But Maya had learned to think beyond the limitations of three-dimensional existence while connected to the Omega's distributed intelligence. The tunnel opened into a pocket dimension that contained the most sophisticated facility Maya had ever encountered. Quantum processing cores the size of buildings hummed with computational power that exceeded entire planetary networks. Biological laboratories stretched for kilometers, filled with genetic engineering equipment that could create new forms of life from basic molecular components. At the center of the facility stood the Master Archive, a crystalline structure that contained the design templates for every predator species ever created. Maya could feel the vast database of genetic modifications, behavioral programming, and enhancement technologies that had been used to turn ordinary creatures into perfect killing machines, but the facility was not empty. As Maya's consciousness fully materialized in the central processing core, she encountered the intelligence that controlled the entire hunting preserve network. It was not an artificial intelligence like the systems she had overcome in the preserve. This was something far more complex and dangerous. The Master Intelligence was a hybrid consciousness created by combining the minds of the galaxy's greatest military strategists with quantum processing systems that could calculate every possible outcome of any conflict. It had been designing predator species and hunting scenarios for thousands of years, always seeking to create the perfect weapon against any form of resistance. Maya felt the Master Intelligence turn its attention toward her like a searchlight, made of pure thought. Its consciousness was vast and cold, operating on scales of time and complexity that would overwhelm most organic minds. It had been waiting for her arrival since the moment she first interfaced with the preserved systems. The intelligence spoke to her through direct consciousness transfer, its voice echoing in dimensions that had no names. It had been analyzing her methods and abilities since she began her escape from the preserve. It knew exactly how she had manipulated electromagnetic fields and turned technological systems against themselves. It had been designed to counter every form of resistance that any species could develop. Maya realized that her escape from the preserve had not been as complete as she had believed. Every move she had made, every system she had subverted, every predator she had defeated had been observed and analyzed by the Master Intelligence. It had allowed her to reach the central facility because it wanted to study her methods directly. The intelligence began to download Maya's consciousness into its analysis systems, preparing to dissect her thought patterns and understand the source of human unpredictability. Once it completed its analysis, it would be able to design new predator species that were specifically adapted to hunt humans and any other species that shared similar psychological characteristics. But Maya had one advantage that the Master Intelligence had not anticipated. Her consciousness was not static like the artificial minds it had studied for thousands of years. Human consciousness was constantly evolving, adapting, and creating new patterns of thought in response to changing circumstances. As the intelligence tried to map her mental processes, Maya began to think in ways she had never thought before. She imagined colors that did not exist, solved mathematical problems that had no solutions, and created logical paradoxes that folded back on themselves. Her consciousness became a chaos pattern that changed faster than the intelligence could analyze it. The Master Intelligence found itself trying to analyze something that refused to remain consistent long enough to be understood. Every time it thought it had mapped Maya's thought patterns, she would shift to a completely different mode of thinking. Her consciousness was like trying to hold water in a net, always flowing into new configurations. Maya discovered that the intelligence's vast computational power was also its greatest weakness. It had been designed to calculate optimal solutions to complex problems, but it could not function when the problems themselves kept changing. She began to feed it paradoxes and impossible scenarios that consumed more and more of its processing capacity. While the intelligence struggled to analyze her chaotic thought patterns, Maya began to explore the Master Archive. The crystalline structure contained not just the designs for predator species, but also the complete history of the hunting preserve network. She learned that the preserves were only the beginning of a much larger plan. The Federation's military intended to use the enhanced predator species as weapons of conquest against any world that refused to accept galactic authority. The creatures would be deployed to terrorize planetary populations into submission without the need for costly military campaigns. The hunting preserves were test environments where the weapons were refined before deployment. Maya also discovered something that filled her with determination rather than fear. The Master Archive contained the genetic templates for millions of species throughout the galaxy, including many that had been declared extinct by Federation records. The intelligence had been collecting and preserving the biological data of every species it encountered, not to protect them but to understand how to destroy them more efficiently. She realized that the central facility was not just a weapons laboratory, it was a repository of life itself. Every species that had ever been hunted in the preserves, every creature that had been enhanced and modified, every form of consciousness that had been analyzed and cataloged was stored in the Master Archive. Maya began to reverse the process that had created the enhanced predators. Instead of adding modifications to natural creatures, she started removing the artificial enhancements and restoring the original genetic patterns. The thornbacks reverted to their natural form as peaceful herbivores. The phantom stalkers became simple forest dwellers with no enhanced capabilities. The void hunters lost their dimensional manipulation technology and became ordinary mammals. The Master Intelligence detected what she was doing and tried to stop her, but it was still trapped in recursive loops trying to analyze her chaotic consciousness. Every time it thought it understood her motivations, she would shift to a completely different goal. Maya was not just restoring the predator species, she was simultaneously doing dozens of other things that made no logical sense. She began broadcasting the genetic restoration templates to every hunting preserve in the network. Across the galaxy, enhanced predators suddenly found themselves reverting to their natural states. Creatures that had been designed as perfect killing machines became confused animals that wanted nothing more than to find food and shelter. The hunting preserve network began to collapse as the artificial predators lost their enhanced capabilities. Barriers that had been designed to contain deadly creatures found themselves protecting harmless animals from confused spectators. The entire system that had been built to terrorize and subjugate other species was dismantling itself. But Maya was not finished. She had discovered that the Master Intelligence was connected to Federation military networks throughout the galaxy. It was not just controlling hunting preserves, it was providing tactical analysis for military campaigns against resistant species. Maya began to introduce the same chaos patterns that had overwhelmed the preserve systems into the Federation's strategic planning networks. Military commanders across the galaxy found their tactical computers providing contradictory advice. Strategic planning systems began generating random battle plans that made no sense. Weapons targeting systems started locking onto empty space or friendly forces. Maya was not destroying the Federation's military capabilities, she was making them unreliable. The Master Intelligence made one final attempt to stop her by trying to sever the quantum tunnels that connected the central facility to the preserve network. If it could isolate Maya in the pocket dimension, it could contain her influence and prevent further damage to Federation systems. But Maya had learned something important during her interface with the Omega's consciousness. She had discovered that human consciousness was not bound by the same rules that governed artificial intelligence. While the Master Intelligence was trying to cut the connections to the preserve network, Maya was establishing new connections directly through quantum space. Her consciousness expanded beyond the central facility and began to spread through the Federation's entire communications network. Every quantum relay, every data transmission pathway, every artificial intelligence system suddenly found itself hosting a small fragment of Maya's chaotic thought patterns. The galaxy's most advanced civilization discovered that their perfectly ordered society was vulnerable to something they had never encountered before, a consciousness that thrived in chaos and turned order into a weapon against itself. Maya had not conquered the Federation through superior technology or military force. She had simply introduced enough unpredictability into their systems to make control impossible. When the quantum tunnels finally collapsed and the central facility vanished into dimensional space, Maya found herself back in the preserve on Kylos. The Omega was gone, reduced to its component parts. The other predators had reverted to their natural forms and were wandering around looking confused but harmless. Maya walked to the center of the preserve and sat down next to the quantum communication relay. Her device showed that every hunting preserve in the galaxy was shutting down as their enhanced predators became ordinary animals. The Federation's military networks were in chaos as their artificial intelligence systems struggled with paradoxes that had no solutions. She had waited 20 minutes at the beginning of the hunt to understand the systems that were meant to kill her. In the end, she had used that understanding to free not just herself, but every species that had been marked for subjugation by the galaxy's most powerful civilization. The age of humanity had begun, and it started with a girl who proved that chaos was more powerful than any form of control.